Welcome to the Chemical Pathology lecture. Today we are going to study the laboratory diagnosis of thyroid gland diseases. Let's take a look to our topics. Number 1. History and introduction to thyroid gland. Number 2. Thyroid hormones, synthesis and transport. Number 3. Functions of thyroid hormones. Number 4. Hyperthyroidism. Number 5. Hypothyroidism. Number 6. Thyroiditis. Number 7. Thyroid cancer. And number 8. Multiple endocrine neoplasia. The objective of this lecture is to describe the laboratory diagnosis of thyroid gland diseases. Let's start talking about the history. In the year 1500, Leonardo da Vinci provided the first illustration of the gland, but it was the anatomist Andreas Vesalius in 1543 who gave the first anatomic description. In 1656, the anatomist Thomas Walton named the gland as thyroid, that means with chair shape, because the gland resembled the chairs commonly used in the ancient Greece. Graves' disease was named in honor to the Irish doctor Robert James Graves, who described the case of goiter with exophthalmos in 1835. The German physician Karl Adolf von Basedow reported the same constellation of symptoms in 1840, and in honor to both of them, the world recognized the signs and symptoms reported by them as Graves-Basedow disease. The Japanese physician Akaru Hashimoto is best known for publishing in 1912 the first description of the disease that would later be named Hashimoto's thyroiditis. The American chemist Edward Calvin Kendall was responsible for the isolation of thyroxine or T4 in 1915, while triiodothyronine or T3 was discovered in 1952 by the French doctor Jean Roche. The process of discovering TSH or thyroid stimulating hormone took place over the early to mid-20th century, and finally TRH or thyrotropin releasing hormone was discovered by the Polish endocrinologist Andrew Scully. Introduction. The thyroid gland appears as an epithelial proliferation at the base of the tongue. Then thyroid descends as a bilobed diverticulum through the thyroglosal duct to the anterior neck, arriving to its final position, and the thyroglosal duct degenerates. The thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped organ composed of two lobules, left and right, connected by a narrow isthmus. The thyroid gland is located in the neck, in front and under the larynx, and in normal adults weighs about 15 to 25 grams, with each lobe being about 5 centimeters long, 3 centimeters wide, and 2 centimeters thick, and the isthmus about 1.25 centimeters in height and width. Sometimes there is a third lobe present called the pyramidal lobe. Microscopically, the functional unit of the thyroid gland is the spherical follicle, lined with a single band of follicular cells that surround a lumen containing dicolide and occasional parafollicular cells. the follicular cells rest on a basement membrane that separates the cells from the surrounding capillaries. The apex of the follicular cells has microvilli that extends into the colloid. The follicles are the sites of thyroid hormone synthesis and storage. Parafollicular cells, also called C cells, are responsible for the synthesis and secretion of calcitonin, a peptide hormone of 32 amino acids that lowers blood calcium levels by inhibiting osteoclast activity in bones and also inhibiting the reabsorption of calcium by the kidneys, increasing the urinary excretion of calcium and opposing to the effects of parathyroid hormone, PTH. The reference value for calcitonin is less than 10 picograms per ml. Thyroid hormones, synthesis and transport. Neurons from the paraventricular area of hypothalamus produce and secrete thyrotropin-releasing hormone, TRH. TRH enters in the hypothalamic pituitary portal system, arriving to the anterior pituitary, where links to its receptors present in the thyrotrope cells. In this moment, you need to know that it's very difficult to develop a specific antibody for TRH measurements, and TRH assays are not clinically useful. TRH increases transcription and translation of messenger RNA for TSH, producing the synthesis of thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH by the thyrotrope cells. Then TSH enters into the surrounding capillaries and arrives to the general circulation. In this moment, you need to know that TSH is a glycoprotein formed by two subunits, alpha and beta, covalently linked. The alpha subunit has the same amino acid sequence that follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, and human chorionic gonadotropin. It is the beta subunit, the one that carries the specific information to bind to the specific hormonal receptors. TSH has a half-life of 1 hour, and the reference range is between 0.4 and 4.5 milli-international units per liter for adults, and in newborns is less than 10 milli-international units per liter. TSH measurement is the most important test of thyroid function. TSH travels through the blood and arrives to the thyroid gland, where links to its receptors in the follicular cells and stimulates the synthesis and release of thyroid hormones T4 and T3. Specifically, TSH stimulates the iodide transporter, increasing the entrance of iodide into the follicular cells, increases the synthesis of thyroglobulin, stimulates the activity of the enzyme thyroperoxidase or TPO, and increases endocytosis of the colloid. TSH induces transcription of genes present in the long arm of chromosome 8, leading to the formation of the messenger RNA for thyroglobulin, that is then translated in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. After this, thyroglobulin is conjugated with carbohydrates in the Golgi's apparatus to form a big glycoprotein with a molecular weight of 660 kilodalton, very rich in tyrosine residues. Then thyroglobulin then is packaged inside vesicles that fuses with the apical membrane, being accumulated in the lumen of the follicles. thyroglobulin has a reference value between 2 to 30 nanograms per ml and a half-life of 2 to 4 days. A normal adult person needs 50 milligrams of iodide per year, approximately 1 milligram per week, or 150 micrograms per day. And iodized salt contains 1 part of sodium iodide per 100,000 parts of the salt to prevent iodine deficiency. The iodide present in the diet is absorbed through the intestinal sodium iodide symporter entering into the circulation, but 80% of the absorbed iodide is excreted by the urine, and 20% of the iodide is taken by the thyroid follicular cells. Let's take a moment to talk about the urinary iodide measurement. A urine iodide concentration between 100 and 199 micrograms per liter indicates no iodide deficiency. A urine iodide concentration between 50 and 99 micrograms per liter indicates a mild iodide deficiency. A urine iodide concentration between 20 and 49 micrograms per liter indicates a moderate iodide deficiency, both with a goiter prevalence between 5 to 29%. A urine iodide concentration of less than 20 micrograms per liter indicates a severe iodide deficiency with a goiter prevalence of equal or more than 30%. It is important to know that goiter means enlargement of the thyroid gland, and that the term endemic goiter means that more than 10% of the population of a specific area has goiter because the land, the water, and the food have a poor iodide concentration. The remaining 20% of iodide spread through the circulation all over the body and arrive to the interstitial space of the thyroid gland. Iodide enters inside the thyroid follicular cells using a sodium iodide symporter called simply NIS that transports 2 sodium and 1 iodide into the follicular cell. This active transport mechanism allows iodide to enter inside the follicular cell against electrical and concentration gradients. In this moment, you need to know that high doses of iodine inhibit sodium iodide symporter (NIS) and organification reaction, leading to hypothyroidism. This is called Wolff-Chaikoff effect. By the other hand, the use of some drugs containing iodine, such as the antiarrhythmic amiodarone, and even the use of iodinated contrast used in CT scan may lead to hyperthyroidism that usually develops over 2 and 12 weeks following iodine administration. This is called Jod-Basedow effect and typically presents in susceptible patients with endemic goiter due to iodine deficiency, in patients with Graves' disease, or even in patients with a thyroid adenoma. In general, the Jod-Basedow effect does not occur in healthy persons with integrity of the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. It is also interesting that Jod means iodine in German, to avoid the erroneous assumption that Jod is a surname involving a non-existent Dr. Jod. Then, iodide moves inside the cell and reach the apical membrane, where the iodide chloride exchanger, known as Pendrin, allows one iodide to enter into the lumen, while 1-chloride enters inside the follicular cell. In this moment, you need to know that thyroperoxidase, or TPO, is an apical membrane enzyme with the active site accessible to the lumen, and that thyroperoxidase performs three very important activities. Thyroperoxidase catalyzes the oxidation of iodide into iodine with the participation of hydrogen peroxide. This is, thyroperoxidase oxidizes two iodide ions to form 2-iodine. The organification reaction refers to the iodination of tyrosine residues, leading to the formation of monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine within the thyroglobulin molecule. The coupling reaction. The coupling reaction refers to the coupling of iodotyrosyl residues. For example, the coupling of a monoiodotyrosine with a diiodotyrosine leads to the formation of triiodotyrosine, or T3, and the coupling of a diiodotyrosine with another diiodotyrosine leads to the formation of tetraiodotyrosine, or T4, also known as thyroxine, within the thyroglobulin molecule. Please remember that thyroperoxidase catalyzes the oxidation of iodide into iodine, the organification reaction, and the coupling reaction. In this moment, you need to know that the colloid is a highly iodinated glycoproteinaceous material present in the lumen of the follicles. After all this, thyroglobulin binds to the endocytic receptor megalin present in the apical membrane, producing the formation of pseudopods that engulf a portion of the colloid, forming a pinocytic vesicle. Once that the pinocytic vesicle is inside of the follicular cell, it fuses with a lysosomal vesicle with the formation of a digestion vesicle or secondary lysosoma, where the lysosomal proteolytic enzymes coat the polypeptide chain of thyroglobulin, producing and releasing into the cytoplasm monoiodotyrosine, diiodotyrosine, and T4 and T3. Monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine will suffer the action of the intracellular enzyme deiodinase that separates iodine from tyrosine. Tyrosine will become part of the intracellular pool of amino acids required for the synthesis of new thyroglobulin, while iodine will be reused again in the synthesis of thyroid hormones. T4 and T3 go out of the follicular cell using the monocarboxylate transporter 8 and 10 present in the basolateral membrane of follicular cells, although monocarboxylate transporter 8 seems to be more important. Of the total amount of thyroid hormones that reach the circulation, approximately 80% is tetraiodotyrosine, T4 or thyroxine, and the remaining 20% is triiodotyrosine or T3. It is very important to know that thyroid hormones T4 and T3 provide a negative feedback on the hypothalamus and more powerfully above the pituitary gland, in order that if thyroid hormones T4 and T3 are high, the production of thyrotropin releasing hormone or TRH by the hypothalamus and thyroid stimulating hormone TSH by the pituitary gland will be suppressed. By the other hand, if thyroid hormones T4 and T3 are low, the negative feedback above the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland stops, and there will be a compensatory increase of TRH by the hypothalamus and an increase of TSH by the pituitary gland, in order that TSH stimulates the synthesis and the release of T4 and T3 by the thyroid gland. In the general circulation, approximately 99% of circulating thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, are protein-bound and do not enter into the cells, acting as storage reservoirs of thyroid hormones. Less than 1% of thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, are in the free form and are biologically active. Total T4 has a reference value between 50 and 170 nanomole per liter, or between 5 to 12.5 micrograms per deciliter, and a half-life of 6 to 7 days, while free T4 has a reference value between 10 and 22 picomole per liter. By the other hand, total T3 has a reference value between 1 and 3 nanomole per liter, or between 60 and 160 micrograms per deciliter, and a half-life of approximately 1 day, while free T3 has a reference value between 2 and 6 picomole per liter. You need to know also that 70% of thyroid hormones are bound to thyroid binding globulin, or TBG, synthesized by liver hepatocytes. And remember that TBG has 10 times more affinity for T4 than for T3. Then, more T4 is bound, and only 0.03% of T4 is free. And also, less T3 is bound to TBG, and more T3 is free, 0.3%. Remember also that 10% of thyroid hormones are bound to prealbumin, also known as transthyretin, and between 15 to 20% of thyroid hormones are bound to albumin. Thyroid binding globulin, TBG, has a reference range between 150 and 360 nanomole per liter, or between 13 and 39 micrograms per deciliter. TBG increases due to the use of some drugs such as clofebrate, heroin, methadone, 5-fluorouracil, oral contraceptives, and estrogens, and also during pregnancy. By the other hand, TBG decreases due to the use of some drugs such as glucocorticoids and androgens, also due to decreasing synthesis as occur in liver failure and cirrhosis, and also due to loss of proteins as occur in the nephrotic syndrome. In this moment, it's very important to understand that in disorders that affect transporter proteins such as TBG, the total values of T4 and T3 will change, but the concentration of the free hormones, free T4 and free T3, and the concentration of TSH will remain unchanged and within the normal range. In other words, if TBG increases, total thyroid hormones, total T4 and total T3 will increase also. If TBG decreases, total T4 and total T3 will decrease also. But the concentrations of free thyroid hormones, this is, the concentration of free T4 and free T3 and also TSH values will remain within the normal range. For example, during pregnancy, estrogen's production increased TBG. The increase in TBG leads to an increase in total T4 and also an increase in total T3 values. But serum free T4 and free T3 and also TSH concentrations remains within the normal range, and that talks about the problem with the transporter proteins instead of problems at any level of the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. Thyroid hormones are lipophilic but cannot go through the cell membranes in a passive manner like other lipophilic substances. They need an ATP-dependent transporter, in this case the monocarboxylate transporter, to enter into the cells. In this moment, it is important to know that thyroxine or T4 is also a prohormone and a reservoir for the more active and main thyroid hormone T3. Once in the cytoplasm of peripheral cells, free T4 suffer the action of the enzyme 5'-monodeiodinase, converting T4 into T3. Also, some amount of free T4 suffer the action of the enzyme 5'-monodeiodinase. Then T4 is converted into reverse T3, that is inactive. Reverse T3 is inactive, and it is known that reverse T3 has a half-life of 4 hours. The remaining thyroid hormones are conjugated with sulfate by the action of phenol sulfotransferases, or may suffer deamination by liver aminotransferases. Finally, T3, that is the active hormone, binds to nuclear receptors and promotes the transcription of many genes and also the translation and synthesis of important molecules that will mediate thyroid hormone functions. Functions of thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormones promote mental, neurologic, physical growth and maturation. It is known that thyroid hormones regulate the expression of genes involved in myelination, migration, neuron differentiation, bone formation, remodeling, linear growth, and muscle development. Thyroid hormones also increase basal metabolic rate, stimulate protein synthesis, for example, increase the synthesis of membrane protein transporters such as the sodium-potassium ATPase. It is important to note that thyroid hormones in normal levels are anabolic, but in excess can lead to catabolism. In relation with carbohydrates, increase gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, increasing blood glucose levels. Also increase lipolysis, enhance mitochondrial metabolism, stimulating the synthesis of enzymes that participate in Krebs cycle, in the oxidative phosphorylation, and in the electron transport chain. Increase oxygen consumption in tissues, leading to an increase in the respiratory rate. Increase vitamin requirements that will be used as cofactors by the different enzymes. Stimulates bone turnover, reabsorption more than mineralization, all those promote bone growth, increase calcium levels, and increase body temperature. Also, thyroid hormones increase sensitivity to catecholamines. In other words, increase sympathetic nervous system activity, for example, by increasing the expression of beta-1 adrenergic receptors, increasing heart rate, and myocardial contractility. All thyroid hormones actions are typically magnified in patients with hyperthyroidism and suppressed in patients with hypothyroidism. Now we are going to talk about hyperthyroidism. The first is to know that thyrotoxicosis refers to a hypermetabolic state due to high levels of thyroid hormones due to any etiology, while the term hyperthyroidism refers to high levels of thyroid hormones only due to thyroid gland problems. Graves-Basedow disease is a primary form of hyperthyroidism of autoimmune origin due to the pathological presence of thyroid-stimulating immunoglobulins, also known as TSI. The pathological antibodies mostly stimulate TSH receptor in the follicular cells, stimulating antibodies, but in rare occasions appears blocking antibodies that inhibit the stimulation of the follicular cells through the TSH receptor. The presence of blocking antibodies usually do not cause any symptom, however, in a few cases may lead to the development of hypothyroidism. Despite these words, the main idea here is that in 90% of the cases with TSI antibodies, these antibodies will stimulate TSH receptors in the follicular cells, leading to hyperthyroidism. The disease is more frequent in women between 20 and 40 years, course with a diffuse hyperplasia of the thyroid gland, and is the most common cause of thyrotoxicosis. Most of the patients present with exophthalmos, and a minority of them also have a localized infiltrative dermopathy called pretibial myxedema. The protrusion of the ice ball exophthalmos is associated with a marked infiltration of the retroorbital space by mononuclear cells, inflammation with edema and swelling of extraocular muscles, accumulation of extracellular matrix components, specifically hydrophilic glycosaminoglycans such as hyaluronic acid and chondroitin sulfate, and with an increasing number of adipocytes, fatty infiltration. These changes displace the ice ball forward and can even interfere with the function of the extraocular muscles. In the case of pretibial myxedema, the dermis is infiltrated by fibroblasts, which express the TSH receptor. Thyroid-stimulating immunoglobulins, TSI, in Graves-Basedow disease stimulates TSH receptors present in the fibroblast, and they produce and release a lot of glycosaminoglycans that are hydrophilic and also attract water, creating this myxedema that can also be seen in primary hypothyroidism, in which the high levels of TSH released by the pituitary gland stimulate TSH receptors in the surface of fibroblasts. By the other hand, thyroid storm refers to the abrupt onset of an extreme form of hyperthyroidism and course with fever, tachycardia, and a high number of patients develop severe cardiac arrhythmias that may lead them to death. Represents an emergency that requires treatment in the ICU. Thyrotoxicosis is classified of the following way. associated with hyperthyroidism and not associated with hyperthyroidism. When thyrotoxicosis is associated with hyperthyroidism, can be due to primary thyroid gland diseases or TSH-independent causes such as Graves-Basedow disease or diffuse hyperplasia of thyroid gland, hyperfunctioning toxic multinodular goiter, hyperfunctioning toxic adenoma, iodine-induced hyperthyroidism, for example due to the use of some drugs such as amiodarone, and also due to some forms of thyroiditis as we are going to study later, and also due to neonatal thyrotoxicosis associated with maternal Graves-Basedow disease. Hyperthyroidism, thyrotoxicosis associated with hyperthyroidism can be also due to secondary production of TSH by the pituitary gland or even due to the production of similar molecules by other entities. These are TSH-dependent causes. Here we include TSH secreting pituitary adenoma and human chorionic gonadotropin-induced hyperthyroidism. We need to know that tumors that secrete human chorionic gonadotropin, such as choriocarcinoma, hydatidiform mole, and metastatic embryonal carcinoma, can cause hyperthyroidism through human chorionic gonadotropin stimulation of TSH receptors due to the great structural similarity between both hormones. Thyrotoxicosis not associated with hyperthyroidism is related with factitious thyrotoxicosis. This is in relation with the exogenous intake of thyroxine, and also when it's not associated with hyperthyroidism can be due to struma ovary, that is in relation with an ovarian teratoma with ectopic thyroid hormones production. Clinical picture of hyperthyroidism. We are going to talk about the different signs and symptoms present in hyperthyroidism, but we are going to present these ones in relation with the different systems. For example, in relation with central and peripheral nervous system, you will see anxiety, emotional lability, and tremor, more evident in the hands. In relation with the cardiovascular system, tachycardia with high risk of atrial fibrillation and hypertension. In relation with the respiratory system, increase in the respiratory rate. In relation with the gastrointestinal system, we are going to be able to see increase in the gastrointestinal tract motility that may lead even to diarrhea. In relation with basal metabolism, we are going to see an increased basal metabolic rate with weight loss, intolerance to heat, increased lipolysis and hypocholesterolemia, hyperglycemia, and increased osteoclastic activity leading to hypercalcemia and osteoporosis. In relation with the skin and the connective tissue, the skin is warm and Graves-Basedow disease is associated with ophthalmopathy and also with pretibial myxedema. In relation with the reproductive system, we are going to be able to see reduction in libido and infertility in men and women. Now we are going to talk about the laboratory diagnosis of hyperthyroidism. In primary hyperthyroidism, due to a thyroid gland disease, TSH-independent causes such as Graves-Basedow disease, thyroid hormones T4 and T3 are high, while TSH is low. It is important to note that some patients may have T4 thyrotoxicosis. This refers to patients with an elevated T4, a normal or low T3, and a low TSH. It is usually an iodide-induced thyrotoxicosis because when iodide is abundant, diiodotyrosine is preferentially formed during organification, and T4 is the predominant hormone synthesized. By the other hand, some patients may have a T3 thyrotoxicosis. This refers to patients with an elevated T3, a normal or low T4, and a low TSH. This pattern is usually due to a hyperfunctioning toxic adenoma. It is also known that T3 thyrotoxicosis is more common in regions with iodide deficiency because when iodide sources are diminished, monoiodotyrosine is preferentially formed during organification, and T3 is the predominant hormone synthesized. A history of cardiac arrhythmia treated with amiodarone or a recent CT scan with iodinated contrast will make you think in an iodine-induced hyperthyroidism through Jod-Basedow effect. In secondary hyperthyroidism, due to a pituitary gland disease, TSH-dependent causes, TSH is high, and thyroid hormones T4 and T3 are also high, as the result of the stimulation mediated by TSH. Data from the interrogation of the patient, the physical exam, and the measurement of human chorionic gonadotropin in blood and also in the urine make possible to do the diagnosis of a hyperthyroidism induced by human chorionic gonadotropin. Also, the obtention of data about other clinical conditions of the patient, such as an ovarian tumor or the use of levothyroxine, will help you to diagnose causes of thyrotoxicosis not associated directly with hyperthyroidism. It is important to know also that subclinical hyperthyroidism is defined by a low level of TSH with normal concentrations of T4 and T3. You can indicate also a radioactive iodine uptake test. The idea is to evaluate thyroid gland function by measuring the amount of radioactive iodine present in the thyroid gland after 2, 6, and 24 hours of its administration. Normal values: uptake at 2 hours between 2.3 and 12%. Uptake at 6 hours between 7 and 15%. And uptake at 24 hours between 10 and 30%. Percentages under the inferior limit suggest hypothyroidism, whereas uptakes above the superior limit indicates hyperthyroidism. You can also indicate gammography of thyroid gland. It's a nuclear medicine imaging study that requires the administration of a radioactive material called radiotracer and provide information about the size, shape, position, and function of the thyroid gland. It is important to note that the areas that concentrate the radiotracer looks hot and means hyperfunctional areas, while the areas that take up less radiotracer looks cold and means hypofunctional areas. Through gammography, it's possible to diagnose a diffuse hot enlargement of the thyroid gland as Graves-Basedow disease, or the presence of multiple hot nodules as a hyperfunctioning toxic multinodular goiter. or the presence of an isolated hot nodule with or without suppression of the rest of the gland as a hyperfunctioning toxic adenoma. By the other hand, cold areas talk about thyroiditis, and cold nodules indicates a hypofunctioning adenoma, focal thyroiditis, and thyroid cancer, among others. It is very important to remember that hot nodules are generally benign, while cold nodules are usually benign but sometimes are malignant, indicating thyroid cancer. Others laboratory findings. Chemistry tests will show hypocholesterolemia, hyperglycemia, and hypercalcemia. Now we are going to talk about hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism is defined as a deficiency in thyroid hormone production or secretion, producing a variety of clinical signs and symptoms of hypometabolism. The prevalence of hypothyroidism in the population is approximately of 0.3%, while subclinical hypothyroidism can be found in greater than 4%. The prevalence increases with age, and it is nearly tenfold more common in women than in men. Cretinism refers to hypothyroidism that develops in neonates, infants, and during early childhood. The term cretin was derived from the French word chrétien, meaning Christian or Christ-like, and was applied because they were considered to be so mentally retarded as to be incapable of sinning. In the past, this disorder occurred commonly in regions of the world where dietary iodine deficiency was endemic, but also occurred due to maternal hypothyroidism during early pregnancy, and on rare occasions may also result from genetic defects that interfere with the biosynthesis of thyroid hormones. Clinical features of cretinism include impaired development of central nervous system and the skeletal system, manifested by severe mental retardation, short stature, impaired motor function, coarse facial features, and increase in the size of the tongue and umbilical hernia. The term myxedema is applied to hypothyroidism developing in older child or adults. Myxedema was first linked to thyroid dysfunction in 1873 by Sir William Gould in an article addressing the development of a cretinoid state in adults. But you need to know that the term myxedema refers also to the appearance of the skin as it becomes infiltrated by glycosaminoglycans. Myxedematous coma refers to an extreme form of hypothyroidism and occurs with progressive stupor that leads to coma, severe bradycardia, and hypotension, hypoventilation or severe decrease in the respiratory rate, and hypothermia, and represents an emergency that requires treatment in the ICU. Hypothyroidism can be classified according to the age of onset in congenital or acquired, and can also be classified according to the affected structure in the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, in primary or due to a defect in the thyroid gland, and secondary or tertiary central hypothyroidism due to a defect in the pituitary gland or in the hypothalamus. Primary causes of hypothyroidism include radiation, For example, radiation therapy using radioactive iodine for the treatment of thyrotoxicosis, external radiotherapy to head and neck for the treatment of non-thyroid malignant disease, the use of drugs with anti-thyroid actions, for example lithium, surgery of thyroid gland with subtotal and total thyroidectomy, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, iodine deficiency leading to diffuse non-toxic simple goiter, infiltrative diseases of thyroid gland such as amyloidosis and lymphomas, dysharmonogenesis or absence of thyroid proteins and enzymes related with the synthesis of thyroid hormones such as the sodium iodide symporter or NIS and thyroperoxidase or TPO, agenesia or complete absence of the thyroid gland and thyroid hypoplasia. Central causes of hypothyroidism include pituitary or hypothalamic failure due to tumors, cranial surgery, head traumas, Sheehan syndrome, Anticella syndrome, etc. It is important to note that Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the most common cause of hypothyroidism in regions where dietary iodine levels are sufficient. It is very important to know also that goiter refers to any enlargement of the thyroid gland and has no relation with the functional state of the gland, because can be seen in patients with hypothyroidism as well as in patients with hyperthyroidism and even in patients with an euthyroid function. In case of iodine deficiency, this leads to an inability to synthesize thyroid hormones, causing a compensatory rise in TSH levels, which in turn causes hypertrophy and hyperplasia of thyroid follicular cells and ultimately a gross enlargement of the thyroid gland called diffuse non-toxic simple goiter. Now we are going to talk about the clinical picture of hypothyroidism. We will mention the different signs and symptoms in relation with the different systems. For example, in relation with central and peripheral nervous system, mental retardation in the newborn, and in adults, poor concentration, impaired memory, psychiatric disturbances, particularly depression, and also neuropathies. In the cardiovascular system, bradycardia and a decreased cardiac output. In the respiratory system, hoarseness of the voice due to deposits of glycosaminoglycans in the larynx. In the gastrointestinal system, reduces gastrointestinal tract motility, causing constipation. Increase the size of the tongue in patients with cretinism due to deposits of glycosaminoglycans in the tongue. In relation with basal metabolism, decreased basal metabolism with weight gain, decreased heat production with intolerance to cold, decreased lipolysis, and hypercholesterolemia. In relation with skin and connective tissue, appears pretibial mixed edema resulting from deposition of glycosaminoglycans, for example, hyaluronic acid within the dermis, facial puffiness, and periorbital edema. The hair becomes coarse, dry, brittle, and there may be thinning of the eyes browns, especially in the lateral portion. In the reproductive system, there will be reduction in libido and infertility in men and women. In hematology, hypothyroid patients frequently have a mild normochromic normocytic or slightly macrocytic anemia due to decreased erythropoiesis as the result of low plasma erythropoietin concentrations. Now we are going to talk about the laboratory diagnosis of hypothyroidism. For the diagnosis of congenital hypothyroidism, you have to request for TSH and T4, although you need to know that TSH is the most sensitive test for the diagnosis. The condition is usually due to iodine deficiency or due to problems in the synthesis of thyroid hormones. Then T4 will be low and TSH will be high. In newborns, if the initial TSH is less than 10 milli-international units per liter, no further actions need to be taken because the result is normal. But if TSH is between 10 and 20 milli-international units per liter, the test must be repeated within the next 2 to 6 weeks. And if TSH is more than 20 milli-international units per liter, suggests the diagnosis of congenital hypothyroidism. In primary hypothyroidism, in the older child or adults, thyroid hormones T4 and T3 are low, while TSH is high. It is important to note that the measurement of T3 is not useful to evaluate patients suspected of having hypothyroidism because T3 levels are within the reference range in 15 to 30% of hypothyroid patients. The most common cause of primary hypothyroidism in regions where dietary iodine are sufficient is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Then it's necessary to indicate the measurement of antithyroid antibodies. This is antibodies against thyroglobulin and also antibodies against thyroperoxidase or thyroid peroxidase. And it is important to note that antithyroid antibodies concentrations above or more than 100 international units per ml are pathological. In central hypothyroidism, thyrotropin-releasing hormone, TRH, and thyroid-stimulating hormone, TSH, will be low, and thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, will be also low. Remember that in clinical practice, we never request for TRH because assays are not available due to the difficulty for the obtention of antibodies against TRH. To distinguish secondary pituitary problems from tertiary hypothalamic disorders, you have to perform the TRH stimulation test. The first step is to obtain a baseline sample for TSH measurement. Proceed to the IV administration to your patient of 200 to 400 micrograms of TRH. Obtain blood samples each 30 minutes during the next 2 hours and measure TSH in all of them. An increase in TSH of 5 to 10 times the basal values is considered normal. If TSH values are less than 5 times the basal value, then the patient has a pituitary problem. If TSH increases more than 10 times the basal value, then the patient has a hypothalamic disorder. It is important to know also that patients with normal values of T4 and T3, but with an increased TSH, have a subclinical hypothyroidism. Other laboratory findings. Chemistry tests will show hypercholesterolemia, and the full blood count and the peripheral blood smear reveal a mild normochromic, normocytic, or slightly macrocytic anemia. We are going to talk now about thyroiditis. Thyroiditis refers to an inflammatory process of the thyroid gland, and the inflammatory process can be acute, subacute, or chronic, giving origin to the classification of thyroiditis in acute thyroiditis that include suppurative thyroiditis. Suppurative thyroiditis is caused by bacterial, fungal, or parasitic infections. Thyroid peroxidase antibodies are absent, and patients are usually euthyroid. Subacute thyroiditis include granulomatous Dicker vein thyroiditis and refers to a subacute inflammatory process due to a viral infection of the upper respiratory tract. Usually has a duration of 6 weeks. It's more common in women between 30 and 50 years and occurs with fever and a painful goiter. This is very important, cause with a painful goiter. In fact, granulomatous thyroiditis is the most common cause of thyroid pain. During the first 2 weeks appears a primary hyperthyroidism due to the rupture of thyroid follicles. After appears a transient hypothyroidism, and finally the patient recovers normal thyroid function. Subacute lymphocytic thyroiditis refers to a middle-aged female patient with an autoimmune-mediated painless thyroiditis that occurs with goiter, lymphocytic inflammation, and an initial phase of primary hyperthyroidism due to the rupture of thyroid follicles, although thyroid function generally returns to normality. In 5% of the women, the disease appears during the postpartum period and is called postpartum thyroiditis. Most of the patients have circulating anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies or a family history of other autoimmune disorders. Some cases can evolve into a primary hypothyroidism over time. Chronic thyroiditis include Riedel fibrosing thyroiditis and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Riedel fibrosing thyroiditis occurs with a chronic inflammation and extensive fibrosis of the thyroid gland that leads to primary hypothyroidism, typically in a young female patient. The physical exam reveals a non-tender enlargement of the thyroid gland with a hard consistence similar to wood, and laboratory test reflects a primary hypothyroidism with low T4 and T3 and high levels of TSH. It is important to note that fibrosis may extend to local structures of the neck, such as the airway, and the invasion of local structures can also be seen in thyroid cancer, mainly due to anaplastic carcinoma of the thyroid gland, but usually anaplastic carcinoma appears in older patients, while Riedel fibrosing thyroiditis appears mainly in a young female patient. A fine needle aspiration biopsy will help you with the differential diagnosis. By the other hand, Hashimoto's thyroiditis refers to an autoimmune-mediated chronic thyroiditis that affects mainly females during menarche, pregnancy, and menopause. Patients present usually with a painless, symmetric, and diffuse enlargement of the gland. The key aspect in Hashimoto's thyroiditis is that patients develop circulating autoantibodies against thyroglobulin and thyroid peroxidase. Typically, antithyroid antibodies above 100 international units per ml are pathological. The autoimmune-mediated attack causes the rupture of thyroid follicles, producing the release of thyroid hormones and giving origin to a transient phase of thyrotoxicosis called Hashimotoxicosis. During this phase, T4 and T3 are elevated while TSH is low and radioactive iodine uptake is decreased. In the typical case, after this phase, the hormonal levels go down slowly, leading gradually to a primary hypothyroidism with low levels of T4 and T3 and a compensatory increase in TSH. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the most common cause of hypothyroidism in regions where dietary iodine levels are sufficient. Also, patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis are at high risk or increased risk for developing B-cell lymphomas within the thyroid gland. Now we are going to talk about thyroid cancer. It is very important to know that usually a solitary nodule in a young male patient with a history of radiotherapy of head and neck that does not uptake radioactive iodine and appears as a cold nodule in mammography suggests the possibility of a malignant nodule. Thyroid carcinomas are grouped as follows: follicular, representing between 5 to 15%, papillary, 80%. Papillary carcinoma is the most common type of thyroid carcinoma and have an excellent prognosis. Anaplastic or undifferentiated, less than 5%, and medullary thyroid carcinoma, 5%. The main value of thyroglobulin measurement is to follow patients with thyroid malignancy postoperatively, being helpful in patients with well-differentiated thyroid carcinoma, but not in those who have undifferentiated tumors or in those with medullary thyroid carcinoma. The idea is that thyroglobulin allows to monitor the persistence or recurrence of thyroid cancer. Before proceed to measure thyroglobulin, we must first administrate recombinant human TSH by parenteral way to our patient, and thyroglobulin is measured 72 hours later. An alternative to this procedure is that the patient stop the treatment with levothyroxine for 1 month, and immediately after this period, the patient will go for thyroglobulin measurement. The idea behind this strategy is to elevate TSH levels in order that TSH stimulates the synthesis of thyroglobulin and also iodine uptake. Any rise of thyroglobulin above 2 nanograms per ml after surgery is suspicious of persistence or recurrence of the disease. Well-differentiated tumors typically increase 10 times thyroglobulin levels after TSH stimulation. The reference value for thyroglobulin is between 2 and 30 nanograms per ml. Medullary thyroid carcinoma, or MTC, originates from the C cells of the thyroid gland and accounts for 5% of thyroid cancers and for 0.57% of all thyroid nodules. The C cells secrete calcitonin. Then, elevated levels of calcitonin suggest the presence of medullary thyroid carcinoma. Serum calcitonin is used to detect residual disease tumor recurrence or metastasis in patients with medullary thyroid carcinoma. Calcitonin should be measured before and 6 months after surgery. The presence of residual tumoral disease or tumor recurrence can be ruled out only if both basal calcitonin and pentagastrin stimulation test or calcium stimulation test show extremely low calcitonin levels. These tests increase calcitonin levels in all stages of medullary thyroid carcinoma. Before we go to talk about this test, it is important to know that medullary thyroid carcinoma is associated with mutations in the RET oncogene, and genetic studies allow the detection of these mutations. The reference value for basal calcitonin is less than 10 picograms per ml. Pentagastrin stimulation test. Administered to the patient an IV infusion of pentagastrin 0.5 micrograms per kilogram of body weight. Collect blood samples at baseline and at 1, 2, 5, and 10 minutes after the administration of pentagastrin and measure calcitonin in all of them. Values under 10 picograms per ml are considered normal. Values between 10 and 50 picograms per ml may be normal in 5% of adults. Values above 50 picograms per ml suggest medullary thyroid carcinoma, and in cases with values above 100 picograms per ml, the patient is referred for surgery. Calcium stimulation test is less sensitive than the pentagastrin test for the diagnosis of medullary thyroid carcinoma, but it is widely available, has a low cost, and a low number of side effects. Proceed to the IV administration of a dose of 2.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight of elemental calcium, corresponding with 25 milligrams per kilogram of calcium gluconate. Collect blood samples at baseline and at 1, 2, and 5 minutes after calcium administration. Calcitonin levels above 100 picograms per ml after calcium stimulation suggest medullary thyroid carcinoma. The multiple endocrine neoplasia, or MEN, describe a group of autosomal dominant familial forms of cancer characterized by a predisposition for tumors involving 2 or more endocrine glands. The MEN syndromes were described in the early 1900s and subsequently were classified into 2 principal categories, MEN1 and MEN2. They were named multiple endocrine neoplasia or multiple endocrine adenomatosis syndromes because they cause tumors in 2 or more types of hormone-secreting organs and consequently produce syndromes of multiple hormone excess. From 1950 to 1980 took place the process of delineation of these syndromes and the recognition of a recurring spectrum of endocrine tumors in sporadic cases and in some families. The current phase in the understanding of these syndromes began in 1980s till today and focuses on the main gene mutated in each disease. The last classification organizes the main multiple endocrine neoplasia syndromes of the following way: MEN1, MEN2, formerly MEN2A, MEN3, formerly MEN2B, and MEN4. A youthful mnemonic to remember the associated neoplasias is the following. For men 1, 3Ps in relation with parathyroid hyperplasia or adenoma leading to primary hyperparathyroidism. This is the most common clinical feature. Pancreatic tumor, for example, insulinoma and glucagonoma, and pituitary tumor. MEN2, formerly MEN2A, 1M and 2Ps. M in relation with medullary thyroid carcinoma, that is usually the first manifestation, pheochromocytoma, and parathyroid hyperplasia. MEN3, formerly MEN2B, 2Ms and 1P. The M in relation with medullary thyroid carcinoma is the first manifestation, also in relation with Marfanoid habitus and mucosal neuroma. These patients show mucosal neuromas of the lips and tongue with a Marfanoid body habitus, and the P in relation with pheochromocytoma. And finally, MEN4, that was first reported in 2006, and patient developed MEN1 associated tumors in association with tumors of the kidneys, adrenals, and reproductive organs. Well, thank you for your attention. This is all for today.